Hey, Steve Saretsky here. Welcome back to the show. I want to introduce a theme that we introduced on the Loonie Hour this week, which is the pendulum. The pendulum politically is swinging from the left over to the right. This has been happening for, I think, for some time now. Obviously, it's been exacerbated or facilitated by Trump getting back into the White House. Of course, his promise to lower taxes, deregulate. Obviously, that's going to attract more capital from around the world. So as a country, you have to be more competitive to retain capital into your country. And so obviously, this is forcing countries to then start to shift. And so, make no mistake, one of the most obvious ways to look at this is, you got Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, who, just 4 or 5 weeks ago was promoting the amazing idea to ramp up the higher capital gains taxes in Canada, now saying, well, hey, if you elect me as prime minister, I'm not going to go forward with that. So, again, it was a great idea 4 or 5 weeks ago. Suddenly, she's walking back that line. And we're seeing conversations around taxation now in Canada, which is just completely out of control, is becoming a frequent topic of conversation. Not just at the federal level, but at provincial and municipal levels around housing. For example, we're talking about development cost charges being reduced. How do we introduce more housing? How do you get more housing on the market today with higher interest rates, higher costs of capital, higher building costs, and weakening demand? Is you have to find something that you can cut right now immediately to make performers work. And one of those things is taxation. So I want to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. I'm going to talk about pendulum swinging from the left to the right and taxation in this country, because I'm going to walk you through really what I see on the housing market day to day. I talk to people every single day on housing from all walks of life. So it gives me that perspective, and I want to kind of share it. And I'm sure it will hit home to many, many of you watching this channel here today. There's a great chart from the Federal Reserve that was posted this past week showing the ratio of disposable income per capita relative to house prices over the last couple decades. And so Canada has seen the worst deterioration in after-tax income relative to house prices in the world. So what this is basically saying is, like, your taxes are going up, you're taking less income home, and your house prices are rising at a faster and faster pace. And so basically your wages are not keeping up with the cost of housing and shelter and house prices. And so this is why housing is truly broken in this country, and particularly in markets like Vancouver and Toronto. And so keep this in mind. I want to point you to, yes, house prices are a runaway. They are a real problem. There's ways that we can fix this over time. But taxation is also an egregious problem in this country. And unfortunately, it seems like every sort of solution in this country, everyone's like, oh, well, we need a tax for that. We need a tax for that. Not realizing this is actually just exacerbating the problem that we're in today. So I want to point you to some data from National Bank economics team, which shows that in Vancouver, where I am here, the required annual income to purchase a median priced home in Vancouver is $258,000. $258,000 to purchase, just to qualify for the median. Not luxury home, not big fancy house with a pool, just the median average home, which in Vancouver isn't getting you a whole lot, is $258,000. Now, if you're making $258,000 in Vancouver, you are getting taxed at over 50%. 50% of your earnings are being taxed. The government considers you rich. They consider you a very rich, high income earning person that should be paying more than half of your income towards taxes. Yet, National Bank is telling you, well, you don't actually qualify. You barely qualify for a median priced home. Now, National Bank's survey, National Bank's data analysis is the $258,000 is what's required to service the mortgage, assuming that, 32% of that is pre-tax income is allocated to your mortgage payments. Okay. So 30%, if you assume 32% of your pre-tax income is going to go towards your mortgage payments, you would need $258,000 to qualify for the median priced home. This does not include the hardest part. The hardest part is saving up for that down payment. Right? Just imagine if you've got, let's say, $1 million home in Vancouver and you're going to put, 20% down, you got to save $200,000 of after-tax income. Now, again, I just told you that if you're earning $250,000, half of that is going to the government in taxation. So once you start paying your rent of $3,000 or $4,000 a month, there's really not a whole lot of savings left after paying the government and after paying your rent to actually save the down payments. The hardest part is actually saving the down payment after all of these taxes. And then not only that is then once you actually are able to obtain the mortgage, then you're going to have to pay to service the mortgage. And so this is the real crux of it. And this is the real crux of the issues that lie in Canada. And this is what I see on a day-to-day basis is very high income earning people, think of, electricians, think of doctors, think of engineers, think of lawyers. I work with all of them. And the biggest challenge is saving the down payment because your income, it just doesn't go far in this country. And the thing that really irks me is that the government thinks that you are that you're rich. You make $200,000 a year, $250,000, you're rich. You should be paying your taxes. But again, it doesn't even qualify you for the median priced home. So this is a real problem that the government needs to fix, and they can fix immediately by slashing taxation. And so, you look at that, the deterioration in after-tax income relative to house prices. Another area that we see this taxation is that about 30% of the cost of new construction in Canada. So you're going out there and you're going to build a new duplex or condo building or townhouse. You pick your structure. About 30% of the cost in cities like Vancouver and Toronto is government fees and taxes. So 30% of the cost of a new home is not, the builder, buying the lumber and building the home and paying for the interest and paying the bank to build it. It's 30% is just going towards government fees and taxes. And this is becoming a larger and larger and larger share of the cost of new construction. And it's no wonder you can't deliver affordable housing anymore. It's no wonder that the cost of new construction is priced significantly above resale pricing, because the cost to deliver it to the market is becoming increasingly more expensive as government fees and taxes go up. And I'll point you to it's a great study here from Mike Moffat, which shows that Toronto's development charges, that just the charges, they say, hey, you want to build a new condo building? Okay, well, the new development charges on a 2-bedroom apartment unit have risen on average by over 17% a year for the last decade in Toronto. 17% a year for the last decade in Toronto is how much development charges have gone up. This is an unsustainable trend that it would cause development cost charges to exceed $4 million a home by the end of Toronto's planning horizon of 2051. So if you just simply extrapolated 17% growth of development charges in perpetuity over up to 2051, the development cost charges alone on a 2-bedroom condo would be $4 million. So clearly this trend cannot sustain itself. Like I said, the pendulum has gone from the far left and it's moving back towards the right because governments are being forced now, as the civilization struggles under the weight of the cost of living, not only through housing, but through taxation. It is forcing governments to adjust. And if they want to stay in power, they have to adjust. And that's why you're seeing people like Chrysler Freeland now coming out and saying, oh, oops, capital gains, I need to get in. This is not very popular. We're going to have to change this, particularly if we don't want to see capital continue to flood out of Canada and into countries such as the United States, which are getting more attractive on a tax basis relative to Canada here at home. And so I just find this really interesting. I obviously watch this for a living in the housing space. This is my realm of expertise, so I can speak at length around the fees and taxations and the regulations of the cost, right? When you have regulations, there's a cost that is involved to the taxpayer to administer those regulations. And so, one of the ones I'd look at just recently, we had the BC government coming out and saying, okay, we got this Airbnb ban, these Airbnb regulations, bad speculators. We need more regulation, more taxes, more costs to stifle this sort of activity. And so what they've done is they brought in I think it was a $400 annual fee to register. So if you do want to Airbnb, you got to jump through all the hoops to make sure you're compliant, which is incredibly difficult, almost impossible, really. But if you can jump through the hoops, it's a $400 annual fee, which goes towards the administration of this program. In addition to that, you had to pay the city of Vancouver a $1,000 business license for Airbnb. So just if you want to Airbnb, basically in the city of Vancouver, you got to pay two governments, basically a combined total of about $1,500, regardless of if you only rent your home out for 3 or 4 nights out of the year, or you rent it out for 2 or 3 months out of the year. Either way, it's going to cost you $1,500 per year, just in licensing requirements. And so the hoops, again, for housing, and again, I don't want to go at length about Airbnb. I think that you need regulation. I just think it's to what extent. I mean, clearly, I think we're going to see the fallout from basically an outright Airbnb ban in tourist destinations across this province. We're hearing stories of Victoria, people that are going, traveling in for surgeries at particular hospitals. They can't get into hotels, but there's no Airbnbs available. We're seeing prominent hotels in the Okanagan shutting down out of the blue as tourism basically grinds to a halt, not only because the economy stinks, but also because people that travel to places like the Okanagan rely on Airbnbs to basically to go there and spend money. And so that tourism sector is dying off because of that. It's amazing, just the hoops that you have to jump through. Again, the conversations that I have, I was speaking with a gentleman this past week where, he's like, okay, I've got my family. My family lives in Vancouver. They're from there. My daughter goes to school here in Vancouver. I'm currently working in the United States. I'm an American citizen, but I want to come back to Vancouver. I want to buy a home for myself. We're separated, so I want to buy a home for myself so that I can be closer to my daughter. I'll work remote. I'll work in the United States, paid by the United States, but I'm going to be here in Vancouver, owning my home and working sort of remote. And how do I buy a house? And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, are you going to apply for permanent residency status? Are you going to live in the home for a minimum of 6 months of the year? The disclosures you have to jump through. So you got the city of Vancouver, you got the empty homes tax, which has to be occupied for a minimum of 6 months a year. You've got the BC speculation tax to keep in mind. Are you paying Canadian income taxes here? Okay, you're not because you're an American company. You've then got potentially the foreign buyer's tax, which is a 20% tax as a foreigner. Which again, you can be exempt if you apply for permanent residency status and are approved in that queue prior to closing. And now you've got the national federal foreign buyer ban, which basically wipes all of that out. So all of these hoops that we had to jump through, we're trying to figure it out. We've got lawyers on the call and saying, okay, how does this work? What if the wife, who's a Canadian citizen, buys the home? And you sign a contractual agreement on the side that you're the owner. Is that considered beneficial ownership? We have now a beneficial ownership registry in BC. And so you guys can see, I'm probably confusing you in this video. That is how complicated it has become in the housing sector. It feels like every several months, there's a new policy, a new regulation, in the housing market that is being introduced it's almost making it impossible to navigate. And the cost of changing homes, to keep in mind, we just raised the property taxes as well over the years. particularly on luxury properties. So it's making it harder and harder to actually move and navigate. There's also a school tax, which is a luxury, basically a luxury tax, annual tax on your home. And so again, it's actually incredible navigating this space to see what this country has pretzeled its way into, which is a quagmire of regulations, big government, excess taxes. That's basically it's cannibalizing itself and making it possible for people to live here and move here and relocate and change. And so it's a mess. It's a mess. And so we'll continue to monitor this space. Like I said, I think the pendulum is swinging from the left to the right, where hopefully we get some government in the air to fix it. Again, we've talked about this government coming in and saying we're going to lower the capital gains rate after hiking it up. You've got the conservative government saying they're going to remove taxes on new homes, GST, 5% GST on homes under $1 million. You've got some municipal governments saying they're going to start lowering their development cost charges. So we'll see. We'll see how much of this is actually talk, but I think it's a real problem that is a real cost on the everyday life of your normal citizens. Again, I would highly point you to the comment from National Bank, which shows to own the median priced home, it requires $258,000 in the city of Vancouver, at which point you are taxed as if you are a very rich, wealthy multimillionaire. So interesting. As always, hope that helped, and we'll see you next week.